On the afternoon of February 19th, 1978, 23-year-old college student Steven Kubacki packed a pair of cross-country skis, a set of poles, and a canvas backpack. He left his car parked near the beach at Saugatuck and stepped out onto the ice. He intended to take a short solo trek into the frozen landscape to clear his head. He was a highly intelligent, independent young man, accustomed to solo travel. He never returned to his vehicle. When night fell and temperatures plummeted well below zero, Kubacki's family realized something was wrong. The following morning, a local search and rescue team mobilized on the ice. Tracking someone in a fresh winter landscape is usually a straightforward task. The snow holds impressions perfectly. The searchers picked up Kubacki's tracks almost immediately. They found a clear single file of footprints and ski ruts cutting directly from the shoreline out onto the open, frozen expanse of the lake. For nearly a mile, the searchers followed the tracks over the ice ridges. There was no sign of panic. The stride was steady and deliberate. But then the search party stopped. At the edge of a massive ice shelf, Steven Kubacki's footprints simply ended. There was no broken ice. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, and no evidence that the ice had collapsed beneath his weight. The tracks did not turn around. They did not veer left or right. They simply stopped mid-stride, as if he had been lifted directly out of the snow. Beside the final pair of footprints resting neatly on the ice, searchers found his cross-country skis and his ski poles. They were placed side by side, perfectly intact. But Steven Kubacki was gone. The local police department and the Coast Guard launched an immediate, exhaustive search operation. They deployed helicopters, low-flying planes, and ground teams with tracking dogs. Dive teams cut holes through the thick ice shelf, searching the freezing, pitch-black water below. The working hypothesis was grim, but logical. Kubacki must have walked to the edge of the ice sheet, slipped into a hidden fissure, and drowned. The currents beneath the Lake Michigan ice are notoriously violent. If a body falls into the lake during a winter storm, it is often carried miles away under the ice caps, never to be recovered until the spring thaw. But as the days turned into weeks, the investigation uncovered details that didn't fit the narrative of a standard tragic drowning. While his skis and poles were left at the edge of the ice, his canvas backpack, which contained his personal ID, money, and additional winter gear, was nowhere to be found. If a man was slipping or falling into the water, he wouldn't meticulously take off his skis, lay his poles down in a neat parallel line, and keep his heavy backpack strapped to his shoulders as he went under. Furthermore, the tracking dogs lost his scent exactly where the footprints ended. They didn't alert to the edge of the water or the ice fissure. They simply became confused. Local theorists and sensationalist newspapers immediately began connecting Kubacki's disappearance to the infamous Lake Michigan Triangle, a geographic anomaly stretching from Ludington to Benton Harbor, known for century-old stories of disappearing vessels, sudden compass failures, and unexplained aerial phenomena. To the public, Steven Kubacki had become a ghost. He was added to the state's official missing persons database, and his family prepared themselves for the eventual recovery of his remains when the spring arrived. Spring came. The ice melted completely. The lake was dragged, beaches were searched, but no body ever washed ashore. By the end of 1978, the case went completely cold. Steven Kubacki was legally presumed dead. His family held a memorial. His college friends moved on, and his name became a footnote in regional cold case files. On the morning of May 5th, 1979, a young man blinked his eyes open. He was lying flat on his back in a grassy field on a hill in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. The sun was warm. He felt completely rested, as if he had just slept for a standard 8 hours. He sat up, looked down at his clothes. and realized he didn't recognize the jacket or the t-shirt he was wearing. He looked at his hands. He looked at the landscape around him. He had absolutely no idea where he was. The last thing he remembered was the bitter, blinding cold of Lake Michigan. He remembered the feeling of the wind hitting his face on a dark February afternoon in 1978. But as he looked around this field, the snow was gone. The trees were fully green. It was spring. The young man walked down the hill toward a nearby road. He felt completely healthy, physically fit, and mentally sharp, but his surroundings were a total anomaly. He walked into a small local convenience store and glanced at the newspaper rack near the counter. The headline wasn't what caught his eye. It was the date printed at the top of the page, May 5th, 1979. He stood entirely frozen in the aisle. According to his internal clock, he had stepped onto the ice of Lake Michigan yesterday. But according to the calendar, 15 months had passed. He was 720 miles away from the spot where his footprints ended in the snow. The young man was indeed Steven Kubacki. When police and medical professionals examined him, they discovered a series of facts that made the case even more disturbing than his initial disappearance. Kubacki was not malnourished. He was clean-shaven, his hair was neatly trimmed, and he had a slight suntan. He did not show any signs of long-term wilderness survival, trauma, or physical abuse. But his belongings told a completely separate story. He was carrying a brand new canvas backpack that he had never owned before. Inside the bag, police found a collection of highway maps detailing routes across several Midwestern and Eastern states. He was wearing new, well-fitting clothes that his family had never seen. He had a small amount of cash in his pocket, but no identification under his own name. When questioned by psychiatrists, federal investigators, and his own family, Kubacki's answer remained entirely unchanged. He had no memory. From the moment his footprints reached the edge of the ice shelf in Michigan to the moment he woke up in the grass in Massachusetts, his mind was a complete blank. 15 months of human life had been completely erased. Psychiatrists tentatively diagnosed Kubacki with a rare psychological phenomenon known as a dissociative fugue state. A fugue state is a severe defense mechanism triggered by extreme internal stress or trauma. The brain essentially shuts down the individual's core identity, forcing them to wander away from their life and adopt a completely new, quiet personality to survive, completely unaware of their past. But a standard fugue state rarely lasts for 15 months without the individual raising flags. To survive for a year and a half, Kubacki would have needed to rent rooms, buy food, talk to employers, and interact with hundreds of people across multiple states. How did a missing college student, whose face was printed in Midwestern newspapers, live a completely parallel life for 15 months without a single person noticing his confusion? How did he acquire new gear, new maps, and a suntan during a cold, northeastern winter? If he was faking it, why would he choose to return in such a bizarre, high-profile manner? And if his amnesia was real, who was living inside his body while his true identity was asleep? 45 years, the case of Steven Kubacki remained an absolute pillar of the American paranormal community. He completed his degree, earned a PhD in linguistics, became a practicing clinical psychologist, and refused every single interview request from television, networks, journalists, and researchers. He remained entirely silent, letting the world believe he was either a medical miracle or a brilliant hoaxer. But in late 2025, after more than 4 decades of absolute secrecy, the silence was broken. Kubacki published a comprehensive memoir revealing the truth behind the 15-month glitch. The reality was far more complex than a simple medical anomaly. Kubacki revealed that his disappearance on the frozen ice of Lake Michigan was completely intentional. As a radical anti-establishment student in the late 1970s, he had actively planned to go underground to escape what he viewed as a corrupt social system. He had meticulously staged the scene on the ice, intentionally placing his skis and poles parallel to each other to create a baffling puzzle that would throw off authorities, allowing him to slip away into a pre-planned network of safe houses and alternative identities. He had lived under a series of aliases, traveling across continents and participating in clandestine, underground networks, but his memoir contained a final twist that blurred the lines between clinical reality and the unexplained. Kubacki stated that while the escape was fully planned, his time in the shadows collided with a profound, terrifying psychological and spiritual shift, a radical alteration of consciousness that left his perception of time, identity, and memory permanently fractured. The amnesia he claimed in 1979 was both a tactical shield to protect the people who helped him disappear, and a genuine reflection of a mind that had completely broken away from its original reality. He had run away from the system, only to realize that the human mind cannot easily survive living as a ghost. Steven Kubacki's case is a profound outlier. It shows how a calculated act of rebellion can morph into a legendary mystery that captivates the world for half a century. We now know how the footprints ended on the ice. We know it wasn't a paranormal tear in reality, but a highly competent, desperate act of escape by a young man who wanted to cease to exist. But the true mystery doesn't lie on the frozen banks of Lake Michigan. It lies in the 15 months that followed, a period of shadows, secret identities, and a psychological fracture that took 45 years to heal. He successfully became a ghost in life and left behind a puzzle that history will never entirely forget. If this deep dive into the limits of human identity kept you hooked, leave a like on the video. It directly helps a growing channel like ours stay alive in the algorithm. And if you want to map out more of history's most unsettling, unexplained outlier cases with us, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching Chat Mystery. Until next time.